Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Dante Fortson here with episode number 5 of Go Ask Your Pastor. German Jews are converts. Got some more evidence here. I know most of you are used to the Arthur Kessler evidence, the 13th tribe, but this is something different. Shout out to, I think it's MacMin007. He or she sent me this piece of evidence, so shout out to them for doing that. So before we go ahead and jump into today's evidence, this episode is brought to you by Completely Missing the Point. When you're a white Sicilian Christian and you read Eric Mason's Woke Church, which addresses racism and injustice in the black community, and then you go write a slavery parody and ask your black friend to sing it. So shout out to Vocab Malone for completely missing the point of Woke Church. So if you guys want to hear a Sicilian's version of a slavery parody, go ahead and click the link in the description or pop on over to Vocab Malone's channel. If you're real nice and you ask and you're polite, he might write you a Holocaust parody too. All right, so Go Ask Your Pastor is a segment on this channel where I attempt to get you excommunicated by having you ask your pastor things that they probably don't want you to ask them. So today's piece of evidence comes from a document, or a book, really, not a document. Well, I guess a book is a document technically. Anyway, comes from a book called The Conquest of a Continent, or The Expansion of the Races in America. This was published in 1933. Now, the publisher, New York, London, Scribner's Sons, but right here, digitizing sponsor, University of Florida. And then you have the contributor, University of Florida. So now this has a little bit of support behind it, credentials behind it, if you consider universities credible. So here's what's interesting about this is that people who do not believe that we have any kind of evidence to support our claims, it's interesting that they also refuse to look at the evidence that also says these other people are not. There's evidence that just literally outright says, hey, these people aren't it, and here's their history. They refuse to acknowledge that, and then they refuse to acknowledge the history that black people are Israel. They hate black people so much that they just refuse to believe that God would ever choose black people. So let me go ahead and read from this. This is page 224 of Conquest of a Continent, The Expansion of the Races. I'm going to go down here. Actually, I'm going to start right here just to lead into this. Page 224, we're going to start near the top, and then we're going to read over to page 225. Excuse me. The most fertile recruiting ground for this type of humanity was in South Europe, Italy, and the Balkan countries, and the provinces of the Austrian Empire and Russia. Inducements were offered potential immigrants to come to America. There was no discrimination as to type or quality. Many criminals were rounded up, especially in southern Italy and Sicily. Oh, Vocab Malone, Sicilian. That's funny. Anyway, with the maybe he should go talk to them instead of telling people he's a expert in black stuff. All right, in southern Italy and Sicily, with the connivance, if not the actual initiative of their governments. As to the ratio of criminals to the Native American population, some interesting figures have been compiled through a first-hand survey of 242 state and federal prisons in the United States during 1931 to 1932. Most of the criminals referred to were committed for serious offenses. The criminals from northwestern Europe were well under, sometimes only 1/4, their ratio to the general population. See, they were already messing with the crime statistics back then. Just so you know, for those that believe that all the crime statistics about black people are legit, they were importing European criminals too. South Europe and Eastern Europe were very much higher. The Filipinos were over twice as many as the proper allowance. Native-born Negroes were 2 3/4 above their allowance, and the Mexicans were 6 1/2 times as many as their ratio to the general population would entitle them to be. It was in this period that the Polish Jews began their tumultuous and frantic invasion, a flood which only recently has been checked, and that with the greatest difficulty. I'm over here right now for those of you watching. The great mass of immigrants from South Poland, Galatia, and Russia are Ashkenazim Jews, descendants in part of Alpine Khazars or the Khazars, with a Mongol admixture, who entered the eastern Ukraine from Asia in the early centuries of our era. Many of the Khazars and their Khan were converted by Jewish missionaries, and they formally accepted Judaism in 740 AD. Let me go ahead and read that part again. Many of the Khazars and their Khan were converted by Jewish missionaries, and they formally accepted Judaism in 740 AD. It is doubtful whether there is a single drop of the old Palestinian Semitic speaking Hebrew blood among these Eastern, or let me back up. It is doubtful whether there is a single drop of the old Palestinian Semitic speaking Hebrew blood among these East European Jews. That's what all the science is coming out and saying now. I've showed you guys that in some of the other studies and addressing the evidence, and we're going to talk about that more and more throughout the Gentile study. But it says that they are East European Jews or Eastern European Jews, and they doubt that there is a single drop of Palestinian Semitic Hebrew blood among them. They are essentially a non-European people. That's interesting, too. The language they speak, Judish or Yiddish, is a corrupt German of the Franconian dialect mixed with the Slavic and Hebrew elements, which fact strengthens the tradition of a large migration of German Jews into Poland in the Middle Ages. It may be that the strain of these German Jews has died out, leaving only their language behind, but in any event, the Polish Jews are now distinctly Alpine, a mixture of Slavs and of Asiatic invaders of Russia. So let me read through that one more time. I just want to read that again, because the people who say that we have no evidence to support our claim, they say that we're anti-Semitic because we claim that these people are lying about their history. If they're not Semitic, then we're not anti-Semitic. And if we are Semitic, then those going against us are actually the ones that are anti-Semitic. But a lot of people don't believe in spiritual warfare. They believe up is up and down is down. They don't believe the first shall be last. They don't believe in God working in irony or using the foolish things to confound the wise. Why would God choose the people who are at the lowest part of the totem pole right now, economically and otherwise? Why would God choose them? God always chooses the underdog. Read your book. Read the book. One more time. The great mass, I'm going to start page 225. The great mass of immigrants from South Poland, Galatia, and Russia were Ashkenazim Jews, descendants in part of Alpine Khazars with a Mongol admixture, who entered the western Ukraine from Asia in the early centuries of our era. Many of the Khazars and their Khan were converted by Jewish missionaries, and they formally accepted Judaism in 740 AD. It is doubtful whether there is a single drop of the old Palestinian Semitic-speaking Hebrew blood among these East European Jews. They are essentially a non-European people. The language they speak, Judish or Yiddish, is a corrupt German of the Franconian dialect mixed with the Slavic and Hebrew elements, which fact strengthens the tradition of a large migration of German Jews into Poland in the Middle Ages. It may be that the strain of these German Jews has died out, leaving only their language behind, but in any event, the Polish Jews are now distinctly Alpine, a mixture of Slavs and Asiatic invaders of Russia. So I want you to take that piece of evidence, go ask your pastor why they're not teaching it. If your pastor is unaware of this evidence, that is fine. Help them get educated. If your pastor is aware of this evidence and has not told you, or they have no desire to teach this evidence or even look into it, you need to find a new pastor. Simple as that. Because it's time we start holding all these pastors accountable for the history and making them answer the questions that we ask. So if you have not yet grabbed your copy of Undeniable Full Color Evidence of Black Israelites in the Bible, you can do so on Amazon.com or Barnes & Noble. And if you want to get a good breakdown of our history, check out the Black Hebrew Awakening, the final 400 years of slaves in America. You can get a good breakdown on our history with that as well. That's also available at Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble. So with that said, until next time, I'm out.